The stars looked peaceful through the observation deck windows of the Aurora Dawn as the civilian transport ship moved through the darkness of space. Lucy Martinez pressed her small face against the cool glass and watched the distant suns twinkle, like diamonds on black cloth. Her younger brother Sam stood beside her, his toy spaceship making quiet, whooshing sounds as he flew it through the air. "Look, Lucy, that star is really bright," Sam said, pointing at a yellow star that seemed larger than the others. Lucy smiled and ruffled his dark hair. At 8 years old, she was only 2 years older than Sam, but she felt responsible for him during their long journey to their new home. "That might be our new sun," she told him. "Uncle Carlos said the star near our new planet is yellow like that one." Sam's eyes grew wide with excitement. Their uncle had been sending letters about the farming colony on Kepler 442b for months, telling them about the rich soil and clean air that would be perfect for growing crops. The Aurora Dawn carried 200 human colonists toward their new home. Families filled the ship's corridors, and children played in the recreation areas while adults talked about their plans for the future. The ship had been traveling for 3 weeks, and everyone was excited about reaching their destination in just 4 more days. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the navigation displays show their steady progress through space. He was a calm man with gray hair and kind eyes who had been flying civilian ships for 20 years. He treated every passenger like family, especially the children who always seemed to find their way to the bridge to ask questions about the stars and planets they passed. "Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council Station," said Lieutenant Amy Foster, the ship's communication officer. She was young and efficient, with blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Morrison nodded and activated the main screen. The image of High Counselor Zethkar appeared on the screen. The Drachnary looked like a large lizard that walked on 2 legs, with golden scales and intelligent green eyes. Despite his reptilian appearance, he spoke with a warm voice that put humans at ease. "Captain Morrison, I hope your journey has been peaceful," Zethkar said. "I am contacting all human vessels in this sector to inform you of increasing tensions between your colonial defense force and the hegemony of Zarthal." "There have been disputes over mineral rights in the Vega system," Morrison frowned. "Political problems between governments should not affect civilian ships, but space could be dangerous when military forces were involved." "Thank you for the warning, High Counselor. Should we change our course?" "That should not be necessary," Zethkar replied. "Both sides have been reminded of the first law of the galaxy. No harm should come to civilian vessels, especially those carrying children. The law has kept peace for 50,000 years. The first law was known throughout the galaxy. Long ago, 2 ancient civilizations had fought a terrible war that destroyed entire star systems. The conflict ended only when both sides realized they were killing each other's children. From that day forward, every spacefaring species agreed that the young of any sentient race were sacred. No matter how bitter the fighting between adults, children were never to be harmed. The Zarthal are an honorable species," Zethkar continued. "They may be angry about territory, but they would never violate the first law. Their own children are precious to them, just as yours are to you." After the transmission ended, Morrison felt better. The first law had prevented countless wars and protected billions of young lives across the galaxy. Every species understood that attacking children meant crossing a line that could never be UNCROSSED. In the ship's medical bay, Dr. Nathan Brooks checked on 6-year-old Katie Sullivan, who had developed a minor fever. Her mother Helen sat beside the examination table, holding her daughter's hand while the doctor used a scanner to check her temperature. "Just a small bug going around the ship," Dr. Brooks said with a smile. "Nothing serious. She'd be fine in a day or 2. Katie managed a weak smile and leaned against her mother. The doctor was a gentle man who always had candy in his pocket for young patients. The ship's corridors buzzed with activity as families prepared for their evening meal. Lucy and Sam walked with their parents Elena and Carlos Martinez toward the dining hall. Elena worked in the ship's hydroponics bay, growing fresh vegetables for everyone to eat, while Carlos helped maintain the ship's engines. Tell us again about the farm we're going to build, Sam asked his father as they found seats at a long table. Carlos smiled and began describing the plans he had made with his brother on Kepler 442b. The soil there is perfect for corn and wheat, Carlos said. And Uncle Miguel says the weather is warm and sunny most of the year. You'll be able to run and play outside every day. Lucy imagined wide fields of green crops under an alien sun, and she felt excited about starting their new life. Other table, engineer Pete Collins sat with his wife and their twin daughters. The girls were only 4 years old, and they giggled as they played with their food. Collins had joined the colony mission to give his family a better life away from the crowded cities of Earth. The ship's intercom crackled to life. This is Captain Morrison. We have received clearance from Galactic Council to continue our journey to Kepler 442b. All systems are normal, and we should arrive on schedule in 4 days. Thank you for your patience. The dining hall filled with happy voices as families talked about their new home. Children ran between tables, playing games and making new friends. The older kids helped serve food to the younger ones, and parents shared stories about the adventures waiting for them on their new world. Lieutenant Foster monitored the ship's sensors from the bridge, watching for any signs of trouble in the space around them. The instruments showed nothing unusual, just the normal background radiation and distant stars. She had been trained to watch for military vessels, but the sector seemed peaceful. In the recreation area, a group of children played zero gravity tag, floating through the air and laughing as they tried to catch each other. Lucy and Sam joined the game, along with Katie Sullivan and the Collins twins. The artificial gravity was turned low in this section, making it safe for children to float and play. I'm going to miss this when we get to the planet, Lucy said as she drifted past a window. Flying around like this is fun. Sam agreed, doing a slow somersault in the air that made the other children laugh. Captain Morrison made his final rounds of the ship before the night shift took over. He stopped by the children's section, where parents were putting their young ones to bed. The sight of families settling down for the night made him feel proud of his job. He was helping these people start new lives, and that was worth more than any military medal. As the Aurora Dawn continued through the darkness toward Kepler 442b, 200 souls slept peacefully in their beds, trusting in the safety of space and the protection of galactic law. The first law had kept children safe for 50,000 years, and there was no reason to think tomorrow would be any different. But in the deep black of space, something moved in the shadows between stars, and the peaceful night was about to end forever. The alarm started screaming 3 days later while most of the Aurora Dawn's passengers were eating breakfast. Lucy Martinez dropped her spoon into her cereal bowl as the red warning lights began flashing throughout the dining hall. Captain, Morrison's voice came over the intercom, calm but serious. All passengers, please remain calm and stay where you are. We have encountered a military vessel that wants to speak with us. This is routine in space travel. Please stay seated until further notice. But Lucy could see the worry in her mother's eyes. Elena Martinez reached across the table and took both her children's hands. It's okay, she whispered, though her voice shook slightly. Captain Morrison will handle everything. On the bridge, Morrison stared at the massive ships that had appeared around them. 12 Zarthal vessels surrounded the Aurora Dawn like wolves circling a sheep. The insectoid ships were dark and angular, covered in weapon ports that gleamed in the starlight. Each one was 3 times larger than the civilian transport. Sir, they're demanding we stop all engines and prepare for inspection, Lieutenant Foster reported from her communication station. Her hands trembled as she worked the controls. The lead ship is broadcasting on all frequencies. Morrison activated the main screen and found himself looking at War Prime Zendar. The Zarthal commander looked like a giant praying mantis with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the bridge lights. His voice buzzed with electronic translation as he spoke. Human vessel, you are in violation of Zarthal space. Prepare to be boarded and your passengers questioned. This is Captain Morrison of the civilian transport Aurora Dawn, Morrison replied, keeping his voice steady. We are traveling on approved galactic routes to Kepler 442b. We have clearance from the Galactic Council. We are carrying 200 civilian colonists, including 15 children. Zendar's compound eyes seem to glow brighter. Children mean nothing to me, human. Your species expands into our territory like a disease. Today that expansion ends, Morrison felt ice in his stomach. No military commander had ever spoken about children that way. War Prime, I remind you of the first law of the galaxy. We are civilians with children aboard. The law protects us. Your law is weak, Zendar hissed. We follow only Zarthal law now. In the medical bay, Dr. Brooks was checking on Katie Sullivan when the alarms began. The little girl's fever had broken during the night, and she was feeling much better. Her mother Helen sat beside the examination bed, but now both mother and daughter looked scared. What's happening, Dr. Brooks? Helen asked as the red lights flashed overhead. Are we in danger? Before Brooks could answer, the ship shuddered as something powerful grabbed it. The Zarthal ships had extended tractor beams that held the Aurora Dawn in place like invisible chains. The doctor steadied himself against the wall and tried to smile reassuringly. I'm sure it's just a routine inspection, he said, though he didn't believe his own words. Let's get you both to the emergency shelter areas just in case. Throughout the ship, parents gathered their children and moved toward the designated safe zones. The Aurora Dawn had been built with reinforced sections that could protect passengers if something went wrong. Lucy and Sam Martinez walked with their parents toward the center of the ship, where the walls were thickest. I'm scared, Sam whispered. To his sister, Lucy squeezed his hand tighter. Captain Morrison won't let anything happen to us, she said, trying to sound brave. And the law protects children. Remember what they taught us in school. On the bridge, Morrison tried desperately to contact the Galactic Council. Mayday, this is the Aurora Dawn. We are being held by Zarthal military vessels. They are threatening to board us despite our civilian status and the presence of children. But the Zarthal ships were jamming all communications. No distress. Signal could get through their electronic barriers. Morrison realized with growing horror that they were completely cut off from help.war-prime. Zendar appeared on the screen again. Behind him, other Zarthal officers moved around their bridge like giant insects in armor. One of them, Sub-Commander Veltar, stepped forward. War Prime, this violates galactic law, Veltar said in the buzzing Zarthal language. Children are aboard that vessel. The first law forbids us from harming them. Zendar's head turned toward his subordinate with a sharp, angry movement. The first law is a human creation designed to weaken us. Today we show the galaxy that Zarthal are not bound by alien laws. But War Prime, every species in the galaxy honors the protection of children. If we do this, we will be outcasts. Every civilization will turn against us. Let them try, Zendar snarled. Fear will keep the other species in line. And the humans will learn that their expansion has consequences. Engineer Pete Collins was helping move families to the emergency shelters when he heard the terrible sound. The Zarthal ships were charging their weapons. The deep humming noise grew louder and louder until it seemed to shake the whole ship. Everyone get down, Collins shouted as he pushed his twin daughters toward their mother. The 4-year-old girls were crying, and their mother tried to comfort them while looking around desperately for better cover. In the children's section, Lucy held Sam close as they huddled with other kids behind reinforced walls. The teenage children tried to keep the younger ones calm, but everyone could feel the fear in the air. The ship's lights flickered as the Zarthal weapons reached full power. Remember, we're protected by the law, Lucy whispered to Sam. No one hurts children in space, ever. Captain Morrison made one last desperate plea. War Prime Zendar, I beg you to reconsider. These are innocent people. The children have done nothing wrong. Please honor the first law, but Zendar's compound eyes showed no mercy. The first law dies today, along with your ship. Let this be a message to all humans who dare to expand into Zarthal space. The War Prime raised one of his 4 arms and gave the order that would echo through history. All ships, open fire, destroy the human vessel. Leave no survivors. The first energy beam struck the Aurora Dawn's hull like a bolt of lightning. The ship's shields, designed only for deflecting space debris, collapsed immediately. The second beam tore through the dining hall where families had been eating breakfast just minutes before. The third beam cut through the engine section, causing explosions that shook the entire vessel. Dr. Brooks was running toward the children's section when a plasma bolt melted through the wall beside him. The heat was so intense that his medical coat caught fire. He rolled on the ground to put out the flames, then kept running toward the sounds of screaming children. Pete Collins reached the main corridor just as another energy blast tore through the ship's hull. The explosion threw him against the wall, and he felt his ribs crack. But he got up and kept moving toward his family, determined to protect his twin daughters. The Zarthal ships fired again and again, their weapons designed to destroy military vessels. The Aurora Dawn civilian construction offered no protection against such overwhelming firepower. Hull plates melted, atmosphere vented into space, and the ship's structure began to collapse. In the emergency shelter, Lucy felt the walls shaking around them. Sam was crying, and she held him as tightly as she could. The other children were screaming as the lights went out and emergency power kicked in. "It's okay," Lucy whispered, though she could barely hear her own voice over the noise of destruction. "The law protects us. Someone will come to help us." But no help was coming. The Zarthal had broken the most sacred law in the galaxy, and the Aurora Dawn was dying in the darkness of space. The attack continued for 27 minutes that felt like hours, until finally the enemy weapons fell silent. When the firing stopped, the Aurora Dawn was nothing but a twisted wreck drifting among the stars. Of the 200 souls who had begun the journey to their new home, only 38 were still alive. And in the children's section, where Lucy had promised Sam that the law would protect them, there was only silence and darkness. The first law of the galaxy had been broken, and 15 innocent children had paid the price. But their deaths would not be forgotten, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The distress signal from the Aurora Dawn reached Earth 12 hours after the attack. Lieutenant Amy Foster, bleeding from cuts on her face and barely conscious, had managed to send the ship's complete sensor logs before the communication systems failed completely. The message traveled through space at faster-than-light speed, carrying with it the proof of something that had never happened before in 50,000 years. Admiral Roy Patterson was drinking coffee in his office on Luna Station when the emergency alert came through. The gray-haired commander of the Colonial Defense Force had been reviewing routine patrol reports when his aide burst through the door with a datapad in her hands. "Sir, you need to see this immediately," she said, her voice shaking. "It's from the Aurora Dawn." Patterson took the pad and began reading. His coffee cup fell from his hand and shattered on the floor as he saw the sensor data. The recording showed everything: the Zarthal ships surrounding the civilian transport, War Prime, Zendar's words about the first law meaning nothing, and the deliberate targeting of a vessel carrying children. "Get me President Monroe on the emergency channel," Patterson said, his voice cold as ice. "And send copies of this data to every Colonial Defense Force commander in human space." Code red authorization. Within an hour, the news had spread to every human colony and outpost. On Mars, construction workers stopped their jobs to watch the recordings on public screens. On Europa, families gathered in their homes to see the faces of the 15 children who had died. On Titan, military personnel stood in silent rows as the names of the dead were read aloud. President Lisa Monroe addressed the Global Assembly from the Capitol building in New Geneva. The tall woman with silver hair had led humanity through trade disputes and colonial expansion, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Behind her, a large screen showed the school pictures of Lucy Martinez, Sam Martinez, Katie Sullivan, and the 12 other children who had been murdered. "Fellow humans," Monroe began, her voice carrying across the solar system, "today we have witnessed the unthinkable. The first law of the galaxy, which has protected children for 50,000 years, has been deliberately broken. 15 innocent human children have been murdered by the Zarthal military. The assembly hall was completely silent. Representatives from every human world sat in shocked stillness as Monroe continued. Lucy Martinez was 8 years old. She loved to draw pictures of flowers and wanted to be a teacher when she grew up. Sam Martinez was 6. He collected toy spaceships and dreamed of being a pilot. Katie Sullivan was sick with a fever when she died. She was only 6 years old. Monroe's voice grew stronger as she spoke. These children were not soldiers. They were not threats to anyone. They were innocent souls traveling to a new world with their families, protected by the most sacred law in galactic civilization. That law has been broken, and we will not let their deaths go unpunished. On the Galactic Council Station near Proxima, Centauri, High Counselor Zethkar called an emergency session. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the Great Chamber, their faces showing shock and horror at what they had learned. The Draknari counselor's golden scales seemed to have lost their shine as he addressed the assembly. Friends, we face a crisis unlike any in our recorded history, Zethkar said. The sensor logs from the Aurora Dawn are clear and undeniable. The Zarthal military has deliberately violated the first law by attacking a civilian vessel carrying children. Ambassador Helen Wright represented humanity at the council. She was a diplomatic woman who had spent years building relationships with alien species, but now her face was hard as stone. She stood at the human podium with the sensor data displayed on screens around the chamber. The evidence speaks for itself, Wright said. War Prime Zendar was told repeatedly that children were aboard the Aurora Dawn. He was reminded of the first law. His own officers warned him that his actions would violate galactic law. He chose to attack anyway. The reaction from the other species was immediate and universal. The bird-like Aviani delegation fluttered their wings in agitation. The crystalline shard singers chimed in harmony to express their shock. Even the usually calm ethereal collective showed disturbing patterns of light across their energy forms. This is unacceptable, declared Ambassador Korth of the Aviani. The protection of children is the foundation of civilized space. Without it, we are no better than savages. But when the Zarthal delegation was called to respond, Hivemind Krelax showed no remorse. The massive insectoid stood at his podium, surrounded by smaller Zarthal advisors, and spoke in the buzzing voice of his species. The humans invaded our territory, Krelax said. They expand like a plague, taking worlds that belong to us. The Aurora Dawn was carrying military colonists to establish a base in our space. Ambassador Wright's eyes flashed with anger. Military colonists? Dr. Nathan Brooks was treating Katie Sullivan for a childhood fever. Elena Martinez was growing vegetables in the ship's garden. Pete Collins was an engineer who joined the mission to give his twin daughters a better life. These were families, not soldiers. You have no proof, Krelax replied. Your sensor logs could have been altered. Zarthal do not recognize human law or human claims to innocence. Wright activated another screen showing Dr. Brooks' medical records. Here are the pediatric treatment logs for all 15 children. Routine vaccinations, minor injuries from playing, 1 case of space sickness. The youngest victim was 3 years old. What military threat could a 3-year-old pose to your empire? The chamber erupted in angry voices from dozens of species. The Zarthal delegation was condemned by every other representative present. Formal censure motions were introduced, and several species threatened to cut diplomatic ties with the Zarthal entirely, but Krelax simply stood and walked toward the exit. The Zarthal withdraw from this council, he announced. We will not be judged by alien law. We answer only to ourselves. Back on Earth, Admiral Patterson was receiving reports from across human space. The response was unlike anything in human history. Every colony, every outpost, every space station was demanding action. Military recruitment offices were overwhelmed with volunteers. Civilian factories were converting to military production without being asked. Sir, we're getting authorization codes from every colonial government, reported Captain Ben Torres from the destroyer Nightfall, Total Mobilization Authority. Every ship, every soldier, every resource is being placed under military command. Patterson nodded grimly. He had been in the military for 30 years and had never seen anything like this. Humanity was awakening to something that had been sleeping for centuries. The last time humans had fought a total war was during the Martian Rebellion, and that had been over political differences. This was different. This was about dead children. Implement Protocol 7, Patterson ordered. All Colonial Defense Force vessels are to report to Vega Station for fleet assembly. All reserve units are activated. All civilian ships suitable for military conversion are to be retrofitted immediately. Protocol 7 was a military doctrine that most people thought would never be used. It was designed for species-level threats, for wars where humanity's very survival was at stake. It had been written by strategists who understood that humans, when pushed far enough, could become something terrible. The first ships began arriving at Vega Station within 18 hours. The regular Colonial Defense Force fleet of 200 vessels was joined by ships from every human world. Cargo haulers were fitted with weapons. Passenger liners were converted into troop transports. Even private yachts were requisitioned. An armed President Monroe appeared on screens throughout human space again, this time wearing a black dress in mourning for the dead children. Behind her stood the complete leadership of humanity, military commanders, colonial governors, and industrial leaders united in purpose. The Galactic Council has condemned the Zarthal attack, but condemnation is not enough, Monroe said. Words cannot bring back Lucy Martinez or Sam Martinez or Katie Sullivan or the 12 other children who died. Only action can honor their memory. Monroe held up a document that would change the galaxy forever. I am signing Declaration 2387 Alpha, authorizing total war against the Zarthal Empire. This is not a territorial dispute or a trade conflict. This is a war of extermination. The species that murdered our children will cease to exist. The declaration was countersigned by every human leader on every world. For the first time in over 200 years, humanity spoke with one voice. The death of 15 children had accomplished what decades of political meetings never could. It had united the human race in a common cause. Admiral Patterson stood on the bridge of his flagship Endeavour, watching as more ships arrived at Vega Station every hour. The assembly area was filling with vessels of every size and type, all armed and ready for war. The largest military fleet in human history was gathering, and still more ships were coming. Sir, we now have over 400 vessels combat-ready, reported his aide. Industrial Command reports that weapons production has increased by 300%. We're receiving volunteer applications faster than we can process them. Addison looked out at the growing armada and felt something he had never experienced before. This was not anger or hatred. The human fleet struck without warning at dawn on the fourth day after the Aurora Dawn massacre. 400 ships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kethmora system, where War Prime Zendar had established his command base, the Zarthal. Defenders had expected negotiations or perhaps a small military response, but nothing had prepared them for what they saw filling their sensor screens. Admiral Patterson stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, watching the enemy positions through a tactical display. The Zarthal had 40 ships defending the system, including orbital defense platforms and weapon satellites. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a formidable defensive position. But these were not normal circumstances. All ships. This is Admiral Patterson, he broadcast to the human fleet. You have your targets. Remember why we are here. Remember the children. Begin the attack. Captain Lisa Chun commanded the cruiser Retribution, one of the new ships that had been built in secret over the past decade. Like many human vessels, it looked ordinary from the outside, but its weapons systems were far beyond anything the galaxy had seen before. Chun had lost her own daughter in a civilian transport accident years ago, and the death of the Aurora Dawn children had awakened something dark inside her. Target the orbital platforms first, Chun ordered her weapons officer. Full power too. The Quantum Lance batteries. The Quantum Lances were humanity's greatest secret. While other species in the galaxy used plasma weapons and energy beams, human scientists had developed something completely different. The lances fired concentrated, quantum energy that could tear apart matter at the atomic level. When the first beams struck the Zarthal defense platforms, they simply ceased to exist. War Prime Zendar watched in horror from his command ship as his defenses vanished like smoke. Impossible, he buzzed to his officers. Human weapons cannot do this. They are a minor species with limited technology. But Subcommander Veltar was studying the sensor readings with growing fear. War Prime, these energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. The humans have been hiding their true capabilities from us. The human fleet moved through the Zarthal defensive line like a knife through paper. Commander Ben Torres led a squadron of destroyers against the enemy frigates, using tactics that confused and overwhelmed the insectoid ships. His vessel Nightfall moved with impossible speed, its engines powered by antimatter reactors that most species considered too dangerous to use. "Target their engines first," Torres ordered his crew. "We want them alive when we destroy their weapons. Let them float helplessly while they watch their fleet burn." The Zarthal tried to fight back, but their weapons seemed useless against human shield technology. Plasma bolts that should have melted through ship hulls bounced off like raindrops. Energy beams that could destroy asteroids had no effect on human armor plating. Captain Jake Morrison's son David had joined the fleet as a weapons officer aboard the battleship Vengeance. The young man had grown up hearing stories about his father's peaceful missions carrying colonists to new worlds. Now he was helping to destroy the species that had killed children just like the ones his father used to protect. "Fire antimatter torpedoes," David ordered, his voice cold with controlled rage. "Full spread at their command ship." The antimatter weapons struck Zendar's flagship with the force of small suns. The massive Zarthal vessel split in half, its crew dying instantly in the explosion. But Zendar himself had escaped in a smaller ship, fleeing toward the inner system where a civilian Zarthal lived on the planet below. "Admiral," Patterson saw the enemy commanders escape and opened a communication channel. His voice reached every ship in both fleets as he spoke. "War Prime Zendar, this is Admiral Patterson of the human fleet. You murdered 15 children under the protection of galactic law. Today you will pay for that crime." Zendar's face appeared on the communication screen, his compound eyes wild with fear and rage. "You cannot do this, human. There are civilians on the planet below. Your own law protects non-combatants." Patterson's expression was harder than steel. "You gave up the right to invoke law when you broke the first law. There are no civilians in this system anymore. There are only targets." The human fleet began orbital bombardment of the planet below. But these were not the careful, surgical strikes that military doctrine usually required. These were weapons designed to destroy everything. Kinetic bombardment systems dropped tungsten rods from orbit that struck with the force of nuclear weapons. Plasma cannons melted the surface of continents. Antimatter bombs turned cities into craters of glass. Captain Qian watched the destruction through her ship's sensors and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "Make sure the weapons factories are completely destroyed," she told her bombardment. "Officer, I want nothing left that could ever build another ship." On Earth, Dr. Sarah Kim led a team of scientists working around the clock on Project Nightshade. They had been given unlimited resources and one simple mission: create weapons that could target Zarthal biology specifically. Kim was a gentle woman who had spent her career developing medicines to save lives, but the images of the dead children had changed her forever. "The Zarthal nervous system operates on unique bioelectric frequencies," she explained to her team. "If we can create a weapon that disrupts those frequencies, we can kill them without harming other species." The research team worked in shifts, never stopping, driven by the same cold fury that powered the fleet. Within days, they had developed a virus that would attack Zarthal brain tissue while leaving every other form of life untouched. It was elegant, precise, and absolutely deadly. Back in the Kethmora system, the bombardment continued for 12 hours. When it finally stopped, the planet below was a burning wasteland where nothing could survive. War Prime Zendar's ship had been destroyed trying to escape, and 40 Zarthal vessels drifted as wreckage among the stars, but Admiral Patterson was not finished. He opened a communication channel to the entire galaxy, broadcasting on frequencies that every species could receive. His message was simple and clear. This is Admiral Patterson of the Human Colonial Defense Force, the Zarthal Empire violated the first law by murdering human children. They have been punished. Any species that aids the Zarthal in any way will be considered an enemy of humanity and will face the same fate. The message reached the Galactic Council within hours. High Counselor Zethkar watched the recordings of the battle with growing alarm. The human weapons were far beyond anything the Council had imagined possible. The complete destruction of a defended system in less than a day was unprecedented in galactic warfare. They destroyed everything, Zethkar said to Ambassador Wright, who had remained on the station during the attack. Military targets, civilian areas, the entire planetary infrastructure. This goes beyond revenge. Wright's face showed no emotion. The Zarthal chose to break the first law. They chose to murder children. They made this necessary. But the scale of destruction is enormous, the Draknari counselor protested. Billions of Zarthal died in that system. 15 human children died in empty space, Wright replied. Their names were Lucy Martinez, Sam Martinez, Katie Sullivan, and 12 others. They were innocent. They were protected by galactic law. The Zarthal killed them anyway. The ambassador activated a display showing the human fleet's current position. Admiral Patterson is moving toward the next Zarthal system, then the next one after that. This will continue until every Zarthal in the galaxy is dead. Throughout Zarthal space, panic spread like wildfire. Military commanders who had celebrated the Aurora Dawn attack now realized the magnitude of their mistake. Civilian populations tried to flee to other systems, but human ships appeared wherever they ran. Commander Torres and his destroyer squadron specialized in hunting down fleeing vessels. His ships were faster than anything the Zarthal could build, and their sensors could track enemy ships across multiple star systems. There, Torres said, pointing at his tactical display. 3 Zarthal transports trying to reach the neutral zone, intercept course. The human destroyers caught the fleeing ships within hours. Torres opened a communication channel to the Zarthal vessels, showing them images of the 15 dead children. These are the faces of the innocents you murdered, he said. Look at them while you die. The destroyers opened fire with quantum lances, and the Zarthal ships vanished in bursts of light. There were no survivors, just as Admiral Patterson had ordered. No quarter, no mercy. No survivors. The human fleet moved from system to system like a plague of destruction. Each battle was shorter than the last as Zarthal resistance crumbled. The insectoid species had been one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy, but they had never faced an enemy that fought with such cold determination. Dr. Kim's biological weapon was deployed in the third system, released into the atmosphere of Zarthal worlds. The virus spread quickly through the insectoid population, attacking their nervous systems and causing rapid death. Within weeks, entire planets fell silent. The galaxy watched in horror as humanity demonstrated capabilities that no one had suspected. Ship designs that seemed decades ahead of known technology. Weapons that violated the understood laws of physics. Industrial capacity that could produce new fleets faster than they could be destroyed. The surrender came on a Tuesday morning when the last hegemony ship powered down its weapons and transmitted the code that meant total defeat. Admiral Chris Powell stood on the bridge of his flagship watching the enemy vessels drift in space. Like dead nettle shells? 6 months ago, these same ships had seemed unstoppable, and now they floated helpless in the void waiting for human mercy. The hegemony coalition had ruled this part of the galaxy for 1,000 years, but they had never faced anything like humanity when their children were threatened. Every alien species had some protective instinct, but humans were different. When someone hurt their young, the entire species became something else entirely. They became hunters, and they did not stop until justice was served. Captain Lover Johnson walked through the corridors of the captured hegemony command ship with her team behind her. The alien crew members pressed themselves against the walls as she passed. They had heard the stories about what humans did to those who harmed children. Some of the stories were true and some were not, but the fear in their eyes was very real. High Chancellor Vexthara sat in the detention cell looking much smaller than he had during his speeches about human inferiority. His scaled skin had turned a pale green color that meant fear in his species. When Lavra entered the cell, he tried to stand, but his legs shook too much. She looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "You wanted to study human children to understand our aggression." "Patterns," Lavra said in a quiet voice. "Now you can study what happens when you threaten what we love most. The trials begin tomorrow, and every species in the galaxy will watch. They will see what the Hegemony Coalition did to innocent children, and they will never forget the trials took place on the neutral world of Sanctuary Prime, where the Galactic Council had its main courts. Judge Advocate General Mary Collins had been chosen to lead the proceedings because she understood both human law and galactic justice. She was a small woman with gray hair, but when she spoke the entire courtroom listened. The evidence was presented piece by piece, and each new revelation made the assembled delegates more horrified. The hegemony had not just captured human children, but had treated them like laboratory animals. They had performed experiments that caused pain and fear just to see how humans would react. Some children had been killed simply because they tried to protect their younger friends. Dr. Patricia Lee brought the surviving children to testify, and their words cut through the courtroom like knives. 8-year-old Tony Williams spoke about watching his classmates die and how the aliens had laughed when the children cried for their parents. 12-year-old Susan Clark described the medical procedures that left scars on her arms and legs. 15-year-old Kevin Martinez told how he had tried to keep the younger children calm by singing songs his mother had taught him. The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats as they listened. Many had children of their own, and they began to understand why humanity had responded with such fury. The hegemony had not just broken the first law, but had done so with deliberate cruelty. They had turned children into weapons against their own species. Ambassador Kate Sullivan stood before the court during the final arguments, and her voice carried the weight of an entire species behind it. She spoke about the sleepless nights that human parents had endured, not knowing if their children were alive or dead. She described the fury that had consumed every human settlement when they learned what had been done. She explained why there could be no mercy for those who had committed such crimes. The sentence was unanimous. The Hegemony Coalition would be dissolved, and its leaders would spend the rest of their lives in prison. Their worlds would be placed under galactic supervision, and they would pay compensation to every species they had harmed. Most importantly, they would never again be allowed to interact with the children of any species without supervision. But the trials were only the beginning of the changes that swept through the galaxy. The Galactic Council had watched humanity defeat an enemy that had seemed invincible, and they realized that the balance of power had shifted forever. Humans were no longer the young species that needed protection. They had become the protectors. General Paul Martinez was appointed as the first human Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense Forces, and his first action was to establish the Human Protection Protocols. These new laws stated that any threat to human children would be met with immediate response from all member species, but the protocols went further than that. They also protected the children of every other species in the galaxy. The humans had learned something during their war against the hegemony. They had discovered that 12 other species had suffered similar attacks over the past 3 centuries. The vegan traders had lost an entire generation of children to hegemony experiments. The crystalline beings of Alter Prime had been nearly extinct after their young were harvested for their unique properties. The list went on and on. Commander Nick Thompson led the teams that investigated each of these crimes, and what they found made even hardened soldiers weep. The hegemony had been systematically destroying the future of developing species for centuries. They had hidden their crimes behind scientific research and galactic security, but the truth was simple genocide. The rescued human children grew stronger each day under the care of Dr. Patricia Lee and her team. They attended special schools where They learned alongside children from other species who had also survived hegemony attacks. These children formed bonds that would last their entire lives, and they carried a message of hope to the galaxy. Tony Williams became the unofficial spokesperson for all the survivors, and he spoke at the ceremony where the new laws were signed. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. We forgive because that is what makes us strong. But we will never forget because that is what keeps us safe. Our parents fought for us, and now we will fight for all the children who come after us. The ceremony marked the end of one age and the beginning of another. Humanity had taken its place as one of the galaxy's guardian species, not through conquest, but through protection. They had shown that the most dangerous species in the universe was the one that loved its children enough to move heaven and earth. To keep them safe, years passed and the galaxy settled into a new peace. The human protection protocols became the foundation of galactic law, and no species dared to threaten the young of any other. Trade flourished and exploration continued, but everyone remembered the lesson that humanity had taught them. The first law remained unchanged, but its meaning had evolved. It was no longer just a rule about protecting children, but a warning about the consequences of breaking that protection. And throughout the galaxy, whenever species found themselves in conflict, they would remember the simple truth that the humans had taught them. There are some lines that should never be crossed, and some sleeping giants that should never be awakened.